Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November edition of the Garden State Java User Group meetings. We're coming to you live from various parts of the great state of New Jersey. And we are happy to have Erin Schnabel with us tonight. But before we get started on that, I'd like to do our usual set of slides. Our agenda, as always, is to thank our sponsors who've been very generous with our support for us. Talk about some things that are new this month. Introduce Erin, and then an IntelliJ idea giveaway, as we've been doing the last number of months. Our platinum sponsor is JFrog. Our silver sponsor is Azure. Our partner is with DevNexus, and the April 11th to the 13th is the next DevNexus conference, which is in Atlanta, Georgia, and it will be actually in person. We have per meeting sponsors, JetBrains, of course, who has provided the IntelliJ IDEA licenses for the past year now, and Jakarta EE for donating time on Crowdcast, which we used at one time.
Hey, Mike, this is a voice from on high telling you that we can't see your slides yet.
Oh, really? Ooh. Oh, I didn't share the screen. Okay.
Don't forget to plug in.
Let me fix that. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, that would help, wouldn't it? There's always something. All right. All right, let's just real quick, just go over our sponsors here. JFrog, as you can see, Azure, we partner with DevNexus, our per meeting sponsors. And then what's new? So first and foremost, we are happy to introduce Caitlin Mahoney to our leadership team. She's a New Jersey native, moved to Georgia, and contributed quite a bit to the Atlanta Java user group. And then she more recently moved back to New Jersey, and there she is on your screen. So welcome, Caitlin. We look forward to working with you, as we move forward with the Java group.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Awesome, right? And also big news today, Microsoft has, has increased their commitment to the, Java programming language. They signed the JSFP, I think that's what it's called. So they effectively joined the Java community process. So that's welcome news. Scott Selikoff, who is one of our local experts on the Oracle certification exam, just told me that this past week, the exam for JDK 17 has been made available, and that's the number.
It's been announced. It's coming soon.
Okay, all right. So yeah, look forward to that. And JFrog will be holding a Java developer workshop, or DevOps for Java developer workshop. That's tomorrow. I can put this in the chat, so you can register. It's free. And it's with Melissa McKay. She's a dev advocate with JFrog. And I'm sure if you've joined us the last couple of months, we've been announcing that we have a meetup page, and you can find it there. And also to, the Jakarta EE ambassadors, of which I am a member. We have we've resurrected the old Fishcat testing, community acceptance testing. We call it JCAT now, and this is for Jakarta EE. And as you may know, Jakarta EE 10 is scheduled to be released in the first quarter of next year. And also Microprofile 5 is scheduled to come out, I believe, by the end of this month or early next month. So, all right. So Erin Schnabel, I'd like to introduce her. And so she is a senior principal software engineer and maker of things at Red Hat, a Java champion with 20 years under her belt as a developer, technical leader, architect, and evangelist. And she strongly prefers being up to her elbows in code. Hey, that's a good thing. Erin learns and teaches by coding ridiculous things. Now, these are her words, not mine. Things like monster combat, an application that makes monsters fight each other to explore application metrics. Game On, a text adventure game for microservices, and a reactive workshop that munges the Jabberwocky to gain an understanding of how reactive operators work. For me personally, I worked with Erin earlier this year. She was volunteered to be part of a virtual panel for a microservices series that I put together, for InfoQ. So it was with her and Emily Zhang, Otavio, and Cesar Hernandez. So thank you for doing that earlier this year. I certainly appreciate it. So with that, I will shut off my camera and keep my mouth shut, and you can take it away.
No. So yeah, that's my introduction. Those are all my words. I do ridiculous things. That's my mojo. I do have charts to share. If I push all the right buttons, you can see me. Can you still see cameras? If I'm doing that, whatever. Can you still see? Because I talk with my hands, or do I have to put it down here?
I think we'll be able to see you. Don't worry.
Okay.
You'll be in the corner of the picture.
Okay, because I use my hands a lot, and things don't make sense if you can't see that I'm gesticulating wildly. So thank you for having me here. The world tour has been going on for a while for Quarkus. I've done a few. Every one of them has been different. Some rules of the road for me: I love audience participation. So please ask questions, and my hosts, chaperones, people to tell me when I'm done with the hook, whatever. All the questions will be relayed. That's the important part. So again, we're really glad to have you here. I have John Klingen on the phone. John is here. He works with me on the Quarkus team. He also does a lot of microprofile stuff, so you might know his name around. Here he is. Hi, John. He is here to be my conversation partner also, so that we can keep things moving. So please do ask questions, because the more questions you ask, the more random tangents we go on, and the more everybody learns. So I derail the conversation at any point, is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, so that's me and John, and ask questions. We did that. So why did we make Corkis? If we go back to the land all of us know, because Java's been around forever, I think a lot of us have a background in dragons and dinosaurs. We built Corba. We built EJPs on top of Corba. We built these big monoliths to handle distributed workloads. But the way we built and scaled those systems was very, very different than what we're doing now. There's a talk that I want to do that I just haven't ever gotten the chance to write, which is like everything we ever wanted to know about distributed computing, we actually learned on the mainframe, because we keep solving the same problems with now different tools. And the solutions sometimes harken back, but we've got new pieces. So with our old ways, I used to work on WebSphere. I was an IBMer for 21 years. WebSphere's in my blood. That, like, everything scaled vertically. You got really, really big app servers that ran forever, that were well tended, that had incredible tuning, and then you would put all of your little wars on it, right? And then we decided that the mothership model wasn't so good. And in the meantime, we had the whole cloud computing environment come to be. And I still don't think a lot of us really understand the ramifications of cloud resources. I think a lot of us still think we kind of know what cloud native is, but we don't always follow through on all of the implications of what it means with how we change the way we write our applications. So when you start talking about cloud native environments, when you're trying to write applications that can tolerate and take best advantage of dynamically allocated resources, your footprint has to change a lot, right? We're not talking about vertical scaling in these big long-running VMs anymore. We're trying to get to smaller, I mean, like if you want to go to mainframes, smaller address spaces, smaller units of allocated resources that can be deployed more densely not to mention just be deployed more densely, but they need to be able to come and go and be ephemeral and pick a 12-factor thing. They all apply here. And so when you start looking at this, well, a long time ago, I was one of the original technical leaders for Webster Liberty. And now I'm here now working on Quarkus, and both of them are being born at a slightly different inflection points, where we're starting to realize we do need to do something a little different to really take advantage of changes in how we're creating things. And right now, that inflection point, I think, in the Java community is around the availability of being able to compile to native. And when you start thinking about what that means, it starts making you think, well, maybe I need to totally change how my runtime is built, right? How all these pieces fit together, so that I could take better advantage of the resources that I have. And so we talk about Quarkus as supersonic subatomic Java. And we're targeting Quarkus at this environment where Kubernetes is almost kind of assumed, right? It's like that's the underlying fabric of our conversations right now. Cloud Foundry, I think everybody can agree, is mostly dead. We all know app servers are not dead yet. We would like them to be, but they will probably live forever. The Kubernetes is, that's kind of like our assumed underlying framework at this point. And so one of the things we're looking at with Kubernetes is how to make Java workloads function really well in that environment where we now have real for real competition, right? Java's not the only game in town anymore. And so being able to use the skills we have and the depth of knowledge that we have around how to build applications that are enterprise grade and have all of the characteristics that we think are really important on an environment that is dynamic, where we want to be able to pack things more densely. Well, at the same time, we have incumbents like Rust or Go or Python. Well, Python doesn't count because that's interpreted and it takes forever, but you get my point. There's other languages now that are really pushing they're pushing on the incumbency, on the viability in some ways of Java within this cloud environment. It's not something we can take for granted. And so here we have this chance to compile Java that we know down into native images that are footprint equivalent. So all of a sudden there's not this obvious advantage or this obvious perceived advantage, right? Where you can't just say Java's too fat anymore, which is what could be said a little while ago, right? So because we could build native, but that requires us to do some things. And this is actually my favorite part. With Quarkus, we're also really focusing on making it fun to work with Quarkus, making it fun to build applications again, making it easy for you to do things. Two of my least favorite words to use when describing any framework these days are quickly and easily, because everything is quick and easy, but Quarkus does some stuff that's really satisfying, and it brings some of the capabilities that some of the newer languages like Node for front-end development, it brings some of those capabilities to Java developers who traditionally have not had those capabilities. And I really enjoy that bleeding of things. So we'll have some demos. I'm just going to try to get through these charts, and John, you can chip in here at any time. But we're really trying to get you just save it and your code is running. I don't know how many of you have ever run or tried to write Node applications or written any front-end JavaScript that uses Webpack, where you can just monitor, you have a watcher and you just keep writing and it keeps running and you don't ever reload and your tests keep going. And it's a really nice workflow. And we have some stuff that I hope to show you where that is your workflow with Quarkus. You can literally just keep writing code and your tests keep on running, and they'll show you if they fail, and they show you and it's just, wait, I just did that? And it's like, yes, you just did that. It's super satisfying as a developer. So this is a little bit of the backstory where we are trying to change how applications are built. I kind of joke at this point that Quarkus is almost half build tool, and it's like part build tool and part runtime. Because what we're trying to do is look at what your application does. This is without the additional behaviors that native compilation brings in. So even when you're just working within native mode, we're trying to pull a lot more to build time. So if you have been developing Java for a long time, you know that at build time, you do your Maven build or your Maven package, it downloads the universe. That's, well, a trope, but it's true. So, you download the universe, you get all your dependencies, Maven builds the package, right? And then you take your package and you deploy it somewhere. And then at runtime, it reads the config file, it might do class path scanning. We know this very well with Spring. It's looking to see what things are on your class path at runtime to then dynamically configure them and chain them all together, build the model of all the beans, do your CDI injection or your Spring Bean injection, and then you start all of your management stuff, your thread pools and everything else, and then off you go. And that's what happens. So when you're thinking about this is the usual thing. Now, one thing to think about also is if you're in a container, so here's just looking at the flow as it is right now. If you're running in a container, how often does your class path change on that image? And it should be like never. You build the image, it's always the same. So the next question is, well, why can't we do more of that discovery at build time then? It's not going to change later. Like we should be able to do a lot more of that class path scanning, a lot more of that model building at build time. And that's what Quarkus is trying to do. At build time, we're pulling a lot more of that processing. We're just doing a lot more of that at build time. And I can walk you through what some of the build items look like. I can start to walk you through how some of that processing works. If you're curious, happy to do that. But so like that bottom line is we're trying to look at what are the libraries that you have enabled. We have extensions. The whole role of a Quarkus extension is to be like, okay, so you're using Hibernate or you're using Micrometer or you're using MP Health or you're using whatever. And we're just we know what those beans look like. So here we'll start making sure we already a priori know what those are. We will pre-wire what those so at runtime you're still going to get a bootstrapping phase, but it's like a pre-scripted bootstrap. It doesn't have to do any discovery. It already has the list. So it's a much more optimized thing. It knows all the answers already. It just has to inflate them and connect them and it's done, but it doesn't have to discover them because those answers are already known.
Hey, Aaron, can you hear me out of curiosity?
Yes, I can.
So this entire time I have like 5 audio input devices and I kept selecting the wrong one. So this one works. So yeah. So one thing I was going to bring up, it's about why we created Quarkus. It's like in some sense it's just overstated a bit, but it's like self-preservation, right? It's like, you mentioned there's all these languages coming up, right, that are competitive. And if you think about Red Hat, okay, people know us as a Linux company, but we're also a huge Kubernetes company, and in middleware, we're a huge Java company, right? So it's like, well, we have to be able to solve this problem to make our Java middleware run efficiently inside of Kubernetes, and OpenShift, right, is our distribution. So that's part of the reason there. And of course, all the things that we're doing for, solving this problem for our middleware also addresses to everybody else's enterprise applications, right? All the same benefits. Then one other thing I thought I'd bring up here is, keep in mind that this code is all precompiled bytecode. Yeah. So it's like, all we're really doing is just loading code off the disk that's been precompiled like almost like a native binary, right? But it's bytecode.
Exactly.
So that's super efficient.
It is. Right. That's what I was trying to explain just there. And for all of us that care about Java want it to stay, right? I know it was when I did the keynote for J4K, it was like when JavaScript supplanted Java at the top, everybody was kind of like, ooh. And then when we had the thing where Python was it was like, what is happening? So like there's a lot of us who really care about this language, who have spent a lot of time working with it, who like I said, the knowledge, because it's it's over 20 years old, right? 25, we had 25th birthday, right? They had some of the best interviews lately about Java and why it's still alive and how it's still doing well. And I think it's because a lot of us really care. And I actually like that we're getting some challenges from Rust and Go. Like, I think it's making people think and breaking some molds. So I'm digging it. I like what's coming out the other side. But yeah, that's what I was trying to say about like, we're doing all of that build time analysis. We go through everything. We're basically doing this bytecode recording, and then at runtime, it's like you push play, and it then goes through what's already been written down, and off we go. So that covers like the first couple goals. The other thing, this dead code elimination part, a lot of people think about dead code path and elimination as something that Graal does uniquely. But one of the things that we try to do as part of our build step, like as part of our build processing, because we're looking through your code and looking at what you're using, is if we don't detect anything being used, we don't include those things in the recorded bytecode. So we actually do a significant amount of preemptive, I guess. We do some preliminary dead code path and elimination, even if you don't end up using a native image.
And we've also, sorry, I'm going to keep piping in.
No, do it.
You gave me free reign, so this is a warning shot. Yeah, so
I love it. It's better.
We've also optimized our libraries like JPA, Hibernate, right?
Yes.
The implementation we have for dead code elimination, right? So it isn't just saying, well, maybe we'll get lucky. It's like, no, we're actually optimizing our code so that things you don't use actually gets eliminated.
Right. And were you then looking, do they stay, like, do we have too much stuff staying resident in memory afterwards when we don't need it anymore? Like, there's all kinds of stuff that we're doing to try to make sure that it could be released and removed. Yeah, for sure. And so, like, looking at this as a key, like all four of these things, including clear metadata contracts, right? We're always trying to make sure that what ends up in your image is what's needed to run your app and like nothing more. So we're trying to streamline as much as we can as we're working with your code. Okay, so we can flip to some demos and we'll see how this goes. I will tell you, I am not the superest talker and typer at the same time person. I have meatloafs in the oven, like it's baking show. So there's a couple places where if we want to take a topic, I have some spare things. And we'll just see how fast it goes off the rails. So this is when I have links. This is when I have worked with all of the wizards behind the curtain. I have a couple links related to Corkis that we can paste out into the chat. Please try things. I'll talk about some of them. We'll see if we get to others, but we'll see how it goes. But please play. I'm happy to have people playing so that you get questions that are interesting. If I end up not covering a topic that you find super interesting. So the first thing I want to show, I want to talk a little bit about Quarkus 2.0 came out not that long ago. And one of the things that I was involved with was rebooting the Quarkus CLI. Everybody has CLIs, but with this one, we really tried to simplify the amount of stuff you needed to type to get started. So also, this is just a plug for JBang. JBang is kind of fun, even if you don't use it all the time. I'm hoping my terminal here is big enough. Please shout if it isn't. What I like about JBang is it's kind of breaking all of the rules for how to use Java, and it's sort of, I don't know, even if you don't use the JBang style of, using Java to throw together a command line utility. I kind of like how I like how it works. I like how it makes it easier to grab things. So with JBang, we can do an app install of a fresh Quarkus command line, the command line tool. And I have one of the links is to the CLI tooling guide. It has the links for how to install JBang, and basically you can follow along if you want. So that's going to install Quarkus for me. And then I can do a quick, let me see what version I have. What version is this? It'll tell me, okay, it's 2.3.0. And then I can ask it like, if I list extensions, it should show me like the list of all of the extensions that are, I'm going to fix this display, by the way. So this is like, Aaron, that's too much information. I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. But we have a whole bunch of other, like a lot of platform extensions and everything. I'm going to fix this. So this is on me to fix this. We're working through what it should say instead, but I can list all the extensions that are here. That's lovely, wonderful, yay. But what we can do real quick is I can just create an app. So if I go do a Quarkus create, it will just create me an app so I can play right this second. And so it's going to tell me it's in code with Quarkus. If I go here, I can see I've got my little project. I can do a quick VS Code launch here. Is it going to be big enough? All right, let's see what we got. So we have a main method. We've got our, this is a very simple REST application. So we've got a test. We've got our greeting resource, pretty typical stuff. We've got our POM that has all the versions and stuff all populated, and I didn't really have to do that much to get that to work. And so if I have a terminal here, I can use the Quarkus CLI. I can use that to build things. So that'll just go ahead and build my little app for me. It'll download the Maven wrapper. And here's it's running my tests already. So that part's super easy. Okay, so I could do that. The other thing I can do is I can launch into dev mode. Now, Quarkus is pretty cool with the dev mode. So this is what I was kind of alluding to earlier when I said we have some joy going on here. So if I start Quarkus in dev mode, it's still going to do some things here. It says, all right, we're running. I'm going to list it on localhost right here. Oh, I can resume a test or paused. I can resume testing. I could toggle test output. Okay, so let's resume testing. Okay, it's going to run the test. Oh, okay, and it ran and it completed successfully. Well, that's exciting. So if I open up my test, I can say, oh, what did it do? Okay, so it created an endpoint. Well, let's wait. If we look at, just so you know, this is, cook's not in the kitchen yet. This is broken, or this is simple. So let's just say, let me just copy this. Because everybody knows that when you're making endpoints now, when you're going to make a new endpoint, test-driven development, which I take with grains of salt, it says you should write your test with your expected output first, right? That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make the test that fails first. Oh, okay, well, that's expected because we don't have that endpoint yet. There, it failed. All right, great. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. If I was doing this in JavaScript with Mocha, this is the workflow. This is the yumminess that they have, which now we have too. So I can go into greeting resource now and I can say, well, to make this happy, I need another endpoint. So let's just make another endpoint. Lots of cutting and pasting because, of course, what did I say it was going to be called? I need call outs from the audience because I have no brains anymore. Bye. I didn't say goodbye. I just said bye. I guess I'm feeling curt today. So now if I save that, now my test passed because I added the endpoint that satisfied the condition and it just kept running and everything was great. And so I can quit that and that's pretty nice. The other thing that I can do, I need to remember to switch over my environment because I do crazy things. So here I'll flip over to Graal. So the other thing that I can do, oh, I forgot to show you dev mode, but that's okay. Well, let's do dev mode first. If I do Quarkus dev again, I'll show you what dev mode, what the dev UI looks like. We'll have to see which screen this pops up on. And then I might have to do some engineering to figure out which screen it's going to show up on. Of course, it's on the other screen. Okay. So if I bring this down here, I think I have to go here first so I can try. Aha! Okay, so this is the default index page, which is not particularly exciting. But we do a lot of our endpoints under the Q prefix to keep them out of your space. And here is this version of the dev mode editor or the dev mode view. So here I can see my console log in the browser. I can tell that my tests are running. I can control that attribute. Remember, I told the test to resume the last time. This time I didn't. I could do that from here and it would run the tests again. I can manage all of that from the browser if that's my preference. But here we have a config editor, so we can see the config for the application. We can edit things from here if we like. I can also use this view to look at what beans have been installed. I can, given that Quarkus does do Codepath elimination, I can see what beans have been removed. So I can get an idea of what beans didn't have to be used. And if something that I did disappeared, this can help me find the breadcrumbs to figure out, all right, where did my beans go? So that's what the dev mode UI was. We'll try to peek at this with some other applications, and you'll start to see the more stuff you have, in some cases, the more options and other displays and stuff show up here on the config editor. This app right at the moment is really straightforward, so we don't have a lot to see, which is fine.
You want to do a quick, just explain the debug, cycling through debug? You know that one?
No, I don't know that one.
Okay, so if you go down to the window that you have running, just go back to the other screen.
Yes, this one.
Yeah, so if you just press H for more options,
Ooh,
that gives
okay.
you a list of options that you get, and you'll see that you can open up the application in the browser, the dev UI in a browser.
Oh,
by
that's
hitting
right.
D.
Yes,
And then
yes.
J lets you toggle through info, debug, trace without having to hit Control C and restart dev mode.
Oh, that one. Yes. Yes, you
That's
can
really
mess with
handy.
your log level. It is super. Yes, I have done that one. And the live reload stuff I've played with for a while. And of course, the force restart is if something gets a little confused, because when you're dealing with partial loading based on bytecode instrumentation, sometimes things can get confused. So we have a force that the whole thing. Yeah, I forgot about that. Ooh, what did I do? I scrolled, and I bet this is one of the problems with these displays is that if you scroll it, sometimes all of the ANSI encoding can get really confused. I feel bad for Stuart's brain every time I hear about him working on this console, because getting all the colors and the ANSI codes and everything to be happy is difficult. So yeah, but you can change how you're, like, you can make it so that only the broken tests will run, and with, you know, pause it and resume it and all this stuff. What else did I want to show you? I was going to show native mode, although that just takes a while. It doesn't look any different. The nice thing about, and I want to show this in a couple contexts. So this test that I have, it runs as a unit test, or not as a unit test. As a unit test, basically. I can also have a native image test runs, and it takes that test and runs it as an integration test, which means it runs it against the final built image. And there's a couple other ways to do this now. We have a few different forms of integration tests, but the general idea is you want to be able to make sure that the code that you're writing behaves the same in native mode as it does, you know, in JVM mode. And we wanted to allow you to do that without having to write all of your tests over again, which I'm all for this plan. When you're working with Quarkus, did I make it a native thing? Why does my brain not remember my arguments that I made? Yes, it's just native. That would make sense. I should have trusted my own self since I wrote that code. Who knew? So anyway, so we can do the build in native, and this one will take a second, so we'll go look at some other stuff in the meanwhile. But you'll see here, it's going to run the test, and then it'll take a second while Graal goes through and builds all the stuff, and it does take a while because Graal is analyzing all the code paths to make sure it can figure out all the things it needs to reach, so it can build its closed universe view of the world to make the native image. So it does take a couple steps. What I also wanted to show you, while that's in the oven, so to speak, is I can build another app and I can create a CLI app, and I'll call it simple because I don't know why. I just feel like it. So we'll make another app. And this, one of the things that I've been working on a lot is command line applications, which is something we don't often think about with Java because Java jar and setting up the class path and all that stuff was always such a pain. It was like, I actually know of applications that we have where our instructions to tell people how to use it are load it up in Eclipse and set up a launcher, which it's, you know, because it was always awkward. So what we can do now with command line applications, and this is one of the reasons that JBang helps, because JBang will just it'll set up the command line whatever for you, or it's easier in some cases to just build things the way you need them to be built. To build a self-contained, we know a lot more about fat jars now, for example, than we did way back. Yeah, sure, allow that, why not? So if I look at this one, here, if we flip over, so you can see my native build finished while we were looking at that other stuff. So I've got my native build step. Graal is doing its native image thing, looking at all the classes and objects and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm running my native greeting resource IT, which is this one, which runs all the same tests that I ran against the JVM image, or the, you know, it uses all the same tests. And so I can make sure that my native image, or that my native binary of my server style application, this REST application, works the same way. Right, so that's super good. Yay. Okay, so within a CLI, if I look at the CLI in this case, we're looking at a Pico CLI based application, right? And so Pico CLI gives you some nice annotations for creating a command, what the command name is. It gives you some basic help options, a nice way to grab parameters, and then here's a simple thing that says run. So if I do a test Java org Acme. Okay, this is John. This is when you're gonna have to tell me, Aaron, you forgot to cross the T with the, you know, thing. If I make a test of this, and so far this is new, so I might get it all wrong, but we'll try. I'm super excited about this. So we have Quarkus main test as an annotation, and the point of Quarkus main test is to say, I want an easy way to write a test for a CLI that's going to be run and done. It's not a server that's going to run a while. So within our other application, within this greeting resource test here, this is a Quarkus test. So the original Quarkus test says, oh, you're starting a Quarkus app. So I'll start Quarkus. I'll set up the resource for you. It sets up, like, I can use some different annotations here to inject what the listening server port is, right? Because it's trying to do stuff to make it easy for you to test against a server-ish process that runs for a while and presents endpoints and that kind of thing, which doesn't really apply to clients, to command line applications, I should say.
Aaron?
Yeah.
Is it possible to ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I already said that.
A question. Yes. This comes from Dimitri, and he says, let's say I have some files under source main resources folder. Is it possible to read them from the @server endpoint methods?
Yes. Yeah, it's all standard. It's all standard JAX-RS stuff, resource model stuff. Yes, absolutely. Awesome. For sure.
Awesome.
And when you build them as a fat jar, like if you build it, okay, wait. Okay, there's a caveat. I think he's probably asking about there. What's the best way for me to show? Let me come back to that. There's a caveat. I have a thing to show. Let me come back to that. Let me get this done, and then we'll do the other thing. Because I'll go. I won't be able to unwrap the stack. Okay, we'll come back to that. So with the Quarkus main test, I want to test that this binary that I'm making is one and done, right? That it runs, it does what it does, and it's done. So what we've done is how can I show this the best way? So that is, if I do, all right. So if I do a Quarkus build, this is going to take my little command line and it will build it. And if I look under, oh, don't do your ls in your code. That doesn't work for sure. If I look under target, I think I need to still run the Quarkus app jar because I didn't tell it to build Quarkus run jar. No. There. Okay. So it ran my Quarkus jar and it ran my command and it ran it with a little more noise than I wanted. I have, speaking of things tucked under places, I have another thing. I want the banner to be quiet. I want it to be an Uber jar because I want everything enclosed. So yes, this is a little bit, let's take the duck out of the oven and cheat a little bit. Let's build this again. With an Uber jar, it should change what's in the target directory, and then that jar contains everything in it. So now I have my runner jar. So if I do on the runner jar, I get my I get my CLI, right? And because this is Pico CLI, I can do a help and I get my help. This comes out naturally. This is what Pico CLI gets me. So what I can do now with the Quarkus main test, if I want to verify that this is what works, I can add a method. It's going to be a test method, right? And I want it to be a launch. And in this case, I'm not going to have any arguments. Let's have it do help first. I'm going to give it the help argument. And I want this to just, and I can put in the launch result. And then I can do, everybody has their own assertions library that they like best. I just go the long way because I don't know why. I always have, I don't know. I want to look at the results. I want to look at the output. No, why are you showing me that as a byte array? Because it's nope. Yes, that's the right launch result. Yeah. No, it does this. It grabs the wrong launch result every single time. Wrong launch result. That's why it's giving me nonsense. Of course, because we reused a word because there's not enough nouns and naming things is hard. That's why. So now if I look at results, I have get output and I can make sure that contains greeting. That's the name of greeting, because that's the name of my thing. So I can make sure that the output contains greeting, right? And so now if I could just run this test, I can do it 12 times, 12 different ways. If I use it here, if I do it down here, it'll run it. I could run it from within. There's a behavior running it in VS Code that I ran into earlier today that I don't quite understand that I want to talk to Stuart about. But anyway, so here's my test that runs, and it ran the command and it verified that greeting came out and everything's happy. So I can add another test. This is a bit of running into the kitchen. I'm going to give it a parameter. Remember, my command does take a parameter. The default value is Pico CLI, but I can put in another name for this greeting. And so I'm going to give it a value for that parameter. And here I'm saying there's an exit code of 1, which shouldn't match because I haven't gone and changed anything to tell it should return that it should return 1. So this should be a whole bunch of fail going on right here. It was when I was running Quarkus dev against this that I noticed a little bit of strange behavior. So we'll try it now. And I just have to then go and double check with Stuart because I was losing a return code. Okay, good. So here it's got a kind of a lot of output, but I'm telling it, I'm expecting a 1. But it got a 0 return code because I didn't change anything here that would have it return anything other than 0. So that's the expected error result, but you can see my new name is there. So if I take this out, because there is an implied check against return code 0, if I check that, it should run again. And it passed. So the output that came out had my hello new name in there. I can take this actually as a result. And I can, why aren't you showing me that? I think it's echo. Yeah, echo system out. I can make it dump it. I can make it dump it for me. No, don't put random cues in your code. That does not work. Makes bad things happen. So if I do that here with my build, I can see this come out. Now, I'm excited about this for a different reason. And that's because, so you can see here, it dumped out what was printed. And I can, test against the result. Now, the nice thing about this is that if I build this in native, it's going to, I have another way to do this. So I can make a new class here. Name command IT. I have basically the equivalent class. Quarkus main integration test. The Quarkus integration test is the new way to write native code, and I can extends greeting command test. So now again, I have an extension of my unit test, which I'm using. It's basically kind of running within the process in a way that I can use then to verify that it still runs the same if I compile it with native. In native mode. This also means that this test works if, like if I do a Quarkus dev here, there's going to, even without turning on native mode, you'll see it'll run the test twice, basically, once against like unit test stuff that's in progress, and then once again on whatever that built binary was. So if I was going to put this command line application in a Docker container, it would be running it against the Docker container that was built. Oh goodness, my tummy just said it was hungry. If I do this as, oops. We should see it run. I don't know why I didn't see, I'll have to double check the generated applications to see. This one might not include, I'll have to double check this. This might be a fault of the POM XML out of our generated CLI app, because it might not have the integration test step. Is possible. So if this doesn't have it, then I'll show, well, I can show you all this working. So building ridiculous things. John, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? Is John listening? I think John went away. So Dungeons and Dragons started for me accidentally with metrics. It's kind of since taken over my life by accident. One of the things that I have that I wrote over the summer was a client that would convert files that I use on my iPad and my phone that are in XML into Markdown, because that's where I keep some other stuff. And so that client, just to show you what another kind of client works can look like, and this answers your question about resources. So there's a method to my madness here. So like this command line client has a top command. You still have like the name of your command and your options. And then there's what kinds of input you can take and whether or not it's verbose. And as your set of input files, what kind of integer you return. And then I have some subcommands. The Quarkus CLI is the same. There's different subcommands that you can use that then can reference the parent, how you do all of this. Right, it's very fluid. Here, in the case of what I'm doing with this application, I use a note-taking app called Obsidian, and so I have some templates that I have in the resources directory for Obsidian to help me do the conversion into Markdown the way I want it to show up. And I also have like really for real. I was looking at XML and XSD transforms. Do not ask me about my hobby as how it has taken over my life. It is scary. So I have XSD, XSLT files, right? All of those are in resources. And what that means, there's two things that you need to know for that. Let me get back to resources. So in the case of native images, which I think was the question, that the actual question was, if you're in a native, if you compile to a native binary, can you still load resources that would have been in your resources directory? And the answer is yes. You do have to specify where they live. And I don't actually see that in my, I think the templates we pick up automatically because we know that you need them. And I'm not seeing it in this one, which means I should be showing you my Monster Combat one instead. So I'll come back to that one. There's another example I have that will show you that one. I have a problem running this one in native mode is probably why, because of XML reasons. But this is the project that I was working on when we invented the Quarkus main support for test, because I have a test here. I have my test method where I wanted to be able to say, what does my help look like for all of the various subcommands? I wanted to make sure all of that worked. And then I have this more complicated, like how am I going to validate these transforms across several invocations of this command? And I didn't want to have to duplicate all of this to test native mode. And so this was the project that we sort of bounced ideas back and forth with to figure out how that Quarkus test, the Quarkus main test stuff should work. And like in this case, you can see with this method, in the case where you want to test a series of invocations of your CLI, we pass you in, you can ask for a Quarkus main launcher, and we will set up a launcher that you can then use to invoke commands in series, basically. And that works really well. And then I have an integration test that will run all of those tests again in native mode. And for this project, sadly, it actually runs into trouble because of XML, which is sad. But the rest of it is fine. So I hope there's more questions about that because it's really cool the way the Quarkus main test works. I'm really excited about it for building client application or command line applications. John, I don't know if you've seen that at all because it's somewhat new.
I have not, but I will look into it shortly because this is interesting.
Yeah, I am super happy with it. This is, again, if I do the Quarkus build, you'll see it run. If I come back to, no, that's the demo app. If I come back to this one, you can see it's running my native, that's the greeting. Come back here. Here's my greeting command ID. So it's running my same commands, my same greeting command test, and it's running it against my built native image. And that's just, it's really nice to be able to do that. I don't have to write my tests again to have them run. Then I know I'm testing what I wrote. And here, if I look under my target directory now, I have the binary runner. So I should be able to do target simple runner. I have my help, and I have my Garden State Chuck. There. So that's my command line app. Command line stuff is, I'm really starting to play with it because it's fun. What else can we talk about?
So one thing
I wanted to change.
So you talked a lot about testing, and there's some really neat, cool features, and I'm having a hard time keeping up with all this stuff, to be honest. And I'm involved with Quarkus, right? So one of them is we do have mock infrastructure, right? So you could do all sorts of mocking, and we have a pre-built mock for OIDC. So you don't have to run Keycloak. And one other thing I thought I would bring up is one thing that we haven't talked about yet, and maybe we won't have time to do it, but we use test containers a lot behind the scenes. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, Erin.
We can. I have I have an app that I had started updating to use some of the stuff, but I hadn't looked. Like, here's H2, and I think this should start all of the panache. Like, if I just build this, it should do all the stuff in the background.
Well, with H2, it might not because it's in memory.
Because it's in memory.
Yeah, but if you did, so one of the things that we can do is if you just said, I want to use JDBC, right? So you add support for maybe Postgres or MySQL or MariaDB or whatever.
So
right?
let's do it. Let's do it.
All
Tell
right.
me what I'm supposed to be doing. So that means in here, instead of this one, I want to do Postgres.
Yep.
This one.
Yep.
PostgreSQL. And then I think for this application properties, I need to
Comment it all out.
That's what I thought. Just make it all go by.
Yeah, I even comment out the drop and create of the database generation because I think it does that automatically as well.
Okay.
And that's probably keeping logging on is interesting. So the idea behind what we're going to show here is that you can start with Quarkus, 0 configuration, build the database app, and not have to configure anything. We just pre-configure everything for you.
Yeah, and it should work. Like
Do you have Docker running?
No. Oh crap.
It's gonna it's gonna fail. So there's 2 things. One is you can do Docker. So just if you want to start up Docker, go ahead and start up Docker. If we can't show it, that's okay.
No,
I
we
just
can't
recorded-
because I nuked a whole bunch of stuff on my Mac.
Okay.
And I have to put it all back.
All right. So no worries on that. But I just recorded a video with Atomic Jar where we showed how we use their test containers cloud, which basically lets you run test containers instead of using a local Docker machine using their cloud. But that's a little bit separate. But basically, what this will do is it'll just instantiate without any work from you, download Postgres into a test container running inside of Docker, and just automatically just start working, right, with 0 effort. And then if you run a test on that same code, it instantiates a separate test container with Postgres so
Yes.
that you're not having your dev database pollute your test database.
Right. Yeah, I do it. I use it a lot when I'm working on my Linux box. I am in the process right now of trying to addict myself from the Docker Mac client. So I was trying to get Podman set up, but I haven't quite had the brain time. Not that Podman is necessarily hard. I just haven't had the focus. So it's like I'm halfway through rebuilding my tool chain on my Mac, and that was just happened to be the middle of today. Yeah, so we have H2 as a fallback too, so you don't have to do that. But it is used in the stuff that is happening. If you could share the link to your OIDC stuff in the Zoom chat, we can push it out to the YouTube chat because it is cool.
Yeah, let me see what I got. I actually use it. Okay, this is a shameless plug. So Ken Finnegan and I are writing a book on Kubernetes native microservices with Quarkus and microprofile. And I've got in a code repo that should get published soon because the book is getting close. Actually, it might already be out there. But the security chapter, I use the WireMock for OIDC. So you don't have to use, during your tests and stuff, you don't have to install anything.
Yeah, and I've seen
But I'll see what I can find.
Some demos of that working. I haven't used it myself. I was, yeah, it's really nice because testing OIDC stuff is a pain.
John,
and there's a lot of
I have a link set up, and I can post it in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, it is super good.
I'll paste a link to the guide that has it. It just doesn't go into a lot of depth, but I'll send it out.
Cool. The other thing, so we did mention at the beginning that I write ridiculous things. So the other thing that I think we can show, this does answer the question about, oh, I don't have it open. That's a bummer. It does answer the question about resources. Is you do have to tell your native application, you do have to tell it where some things live. It's not always expensive. So this is the Monster Combat application that was mentioned. I have Corkis and Spring applications that are they all basically do the same thing, with the idea that you then have all these monsters fight each other and collect metrics, and then analyze those. And so let's go into resources. Actually, is what I want to do within Quarkus Micrometer. I do a bunch of stuff. Here's an example of an application, right? This is an application that I wrote. There are things that I place. Again, Quarkus is both build tool and runtime tool. So there's things that I have in my application properties that are specific to how the native image is built and how container images are built. So for example, I have an instruction here in my application properties that says, please include this compendium JSON file, which actually comes out of core, I believe. My compendium JSON file is the one that contains all of the monsters that are in it, the swarms of rats and the ancient green dragons and all that stuff. Those are all in that compendium JSON file. And here I am telling the Quarkus native image, please include that file in the native image so that when run in native mode, it can be accessed. I set up a bunch of labels and stuff that I want on my images. I have some instructions for how Prometheus Service Monitor files get generated. That all goes when I do a build of this particular app, which is definitely more advanced. All that stuff ends up getting used. This app is a little crazy, but I think that was the genesis of the question earlier. It was like, it's not just can you use, files in meta and free or in resources, because that's typical. My guess was with native mode, because that's where you wouldn't necessarily know that was done, easy to do, I guess. If I think with these apps, because I have such a combination of them, I wonder if this is going to fail because I don't have Docker anymore. I've usually run this on my Linux box. So I'm like, I am half-brained without Docker desktop on my Mac at the moment. But this is another case where I have tests that then run in, I write the tests once, those tests are run again without me having to rewrite them in native mode. I do have to go back through and redo these because we have a better way to run them. That would then, so John, I don't know if when you're messing around, if you're using native image tests now, or if you're using Quarkus integration tests.
I actually don't do a whole lot of native compilation, to be honest. I do it mainly during demos, but for my own stuff, most of the time, again, this is just a one person show here. I just run everything on the JVM. So.
Right, but I think with the, the thing is, I'm just not going to be able to show you that part because I forgot all about having Docker set up. Because in my head, I always just do it on the other machine. So it's not going to have the image part to build. So this might fail too at the image. I might be able to do this one with native though. Oh, it worked. It was happy. So I should be able to do this also with just native. Oh, I got to turn Grawl on first. All right, so of all of the people that can ask questions directly, what other things should we get into? What other crazy questions might come up? Do you guys have any?
Yeah, Aaron, there was one question about JSON, and just give me a second, I'll get there.
Okay.
Back and forth. Okay, and do you access this JSON from .java, please?
Yes. So yes. So this JSON file that I have right here, it is the source of all of my monsters, like I said. And when this is in, it's still actually in here. When I'm getting started in my compendium, it reads that JSON file. And that's how I get all of my monsters. It's standard Jackson.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Jackson is pulling in this file and I have, boom, 50 bajillion monsters, and then they go beat each other to death.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, cool.
Very important.
Yeah.
Highlander bottle of D&D battling. But yeah, so that works. That's pretty standard fare, I guess. There can be some challenges with native sometimes, because it can't always, like, it can't always infer what you're supposed to do next or what things. Most of the time it'll figure it out, but there are times you have to give it a hint. So this is a file, like in the case of Jackson, you have to tell it, I'm going to be using reflection because these are all objects that I'm reading in from, that I'm going to be using for deserialization. So I need you to, like, it's very commonly Jackson pojos that native mode will get confused about because there's not always a clear reference to them that they need to be available for reflection, but that's what Jackson does. So what was I doing the other day? Oh, that's a whole other wormhole. That does not need to come here. I remember what I was doing. It was awful. It's too much Jackson. That's what that was. So you can see here, it's, go ahead.
There's no other questions at the moment, but I did want to take this time to direct people to the chat. There is a form that attendees can fill out for our raffle at the end of this presentation.
Yeah, do that so you can win things.
Yes, I notice you're using VS Code.
I am.
So
I use IntelliJ also, actually.
Yeah, okay.
But lately, just in the last couple weeks, IntelliJ has gotten really bad with indexing at the worst possible time.
Mm.
So I
can verify that.
I don't know why, but like the last just 2 weeks, it's like every time I turn around, it's indexing the entire universe again, and I swear I didn't touch it. So I'm like, I'm
right in the middle of a demo.
Yeah. So which is like, I'm not using it for my demo because like it'll stop the world. And
wow.
actually, I will make I like
version?
IntelliJ a lot, but I will make this joke only for those of us that are old and that know that I worked at IBM for a long time. It's like we should have learned the lesson about stop the world modal dialogues from Lotus Notes.
Oh, Lotus Notes. Oh boy. That brings back memories. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it might. It's like, oh, ow, ow, ow. Yeah.
So one thing I can bring up is that there are IDE plugins for IntelliJ, Visual Studio Code that do enhanced code completion, like with properties. I think we saw some of that when you were actually doing that.
Well, maybe if I have it on. I turn off a lot of, I'm very I have it, but I don't have it on. I have the so I can reload it, theoretically speaking. I'm picky about how many extensions I have on at any given time because I don't know. I'm one of those people. Okay. Are there any other? I really hope people have questions. If I start this app,
well, I have a broad question, and you don't have to necessarily show code if you don't want to, but can you talk a little bit about the reactive async side of Quarkus?
Yeah. So I
that
actually,
cool.
I think I wrote this in did I use reactive, rest easy reactive, or did I just use rest? Do I even remember? I think this one was just using rest. I have a couple different examples. This one must.
And sorry, I'm bringing my inner micro profile meeting, Michael, since Michael and I are on the micro profile calls. Time check. How much time do we have?
Yeah, we don't have a hard stop.
Yeah, so we can stop when we run out of steam.
You know, we generally advertise. Yeah, we generally advertise as 6:30 to 8:30, but in the early days of the Java group, there's been a few times where we have to 11 o'clock at night.
We're not going there. My kids are going to burn down the house.
That was a long time ago, though.
Yeah. So I actually have now. So this is what's interesting with Rest Easy Reactive. Rest Easy Reactive is a drop-in for normal rest. So, and so when I wrote my Monster Comment application, this just looks like REST. I'm not using anything inherently, not like I'm not doing anything different for me because of just how this works. I'm returning lists. I didn't make any changes for uni or multi, which I could do. But I was able to just drop in one for the other, and where possible, it will substitute non-blocking IO for you, right? So just flipping over, if you don't actually need a lot of blocking behavior, you get benefit, and it's not super disruptive to the way you normally think about your code, and the way you normally write your REST methods, which I haven't touched Spring to know if they changed this. But like when you're working with Webflux, which is the equivalent, right? When you're working with Webflux, the mappings and stuff, they are all the same. So it's similar, right? So when you're working with Spring, you have a get mapping, your request mapping, your REST controller. And then you start working with publishers, for example, to start really getting a reactive flow. And I just hadn't done that part for the Quarkus one yet. What else would you want to talk about, John? I mean, they're drop-in replacement. You can do a lot more with it. You can get into uni and multi, or you don't have to. It tries to be really clear if you're going to do a blocking, like it will try to keep you on basically on like the event loop thread, which would sound familiar if you're used to Node, where it'll try to keep you if it's a real quick loop. And then it will allow you to, it'll tell you if you're going to do a blocking operation, nice error message. So you know, oh, I should mark this one as blocking, and then it'll send you off to blocking, which keeps everybody on the event loop threads nice and zippy. But you can get a lot of benefit without having to think it, like you don't have to rewrite all of your stuff in a language in a format that you don't know to take advantage of reactive, of non-blocking IO, basically with REST easy reactive. It kind of just slides in underneath. Is there anything else you want to add, John?
No, not at the moment. I mean, it's just the entire stack is actually reactive, right?
Yes.
For Quarkus under the hood. So everything is, Java with Netty on top of that, with Vertex on top of that, with
yes,
Quarkus on top of that.
So like for reference, like as an instrumentation kind of person, right? So the micrometer extension that I wrote, and we do measurement of HTTP requests at the Vertex layer, because all of the stacks, whatever they are sitting on top of Vertex. It's the base layer. So I was able to measure servlet, JAX-RS, or like, REST easy reactive, servlet, and undertow web, WebSockets, all from the Vertex layer, which is underneath everything. So yeah, how we manage where your work is running and which thread it's running on to try to optimize throughput is a thing. It's a thing. We do that thing.
Yeah, so you could do async. We have full async, Kafka frameworks. We've got or reactive. We've got full reactive access to the database. Depending on the database, right? Yes. So you could build everything from a UI down to database access, or Kafka and events, all asynchronous, reactive based with no blocking.
Yes. Yeah, it's all doable. What else? Ask questions. Questions are funner. I don't know that I had anything else with charts. It was more like, let's get to demos.
What if I'm a Spring developer? How do I get started with Quarkus?
We have a book for that. We do have a book for using Quarkus with Spring developers. Do you have that link? Can you rummage for it? That just came out recently. But the nice thing is firstly, we have some similar concepts anyway. When you actually think about it, the difference in some cases between what the Spring mappings for REST things are doing, and the JAX-RS mappings are similar anyway, but we can interpret between Spring Web, Spring Data, and a few others. We can map that, we have mappings for those. So if Spring is what you know, moving over to Quarkus is actually, it's super easy. This was something I talked to Chris Richardson about a couple Dev Nexuses ago. And he was able to take, he was able to move his eventuate. He was able to get eventuate ported to Quarkus, and I think that was the way he did it. He went through the Spring portability layer because this stuff was fairly Spring oriented.
Yeah, it's so okay. Another plug. In the book that I referenced earlier, maybe I'll paste a link to that in there too. But so I wrote the Spring chapter about the Spring compatibility layer, and basically there's a traditional JAX-RS GPA style API, and step by step I converted it over to Spring, right? So you could actually do the Spring APIs side by side with the traditional JAX-RS APIs. Sometimes you can mix and match some of these things in the same class. It's you might not want to do that, but you could definitely do it in the same application.
I have my camera in a dumb place.
Yeah, and then I'll also I pasted a link to Eric Deandra's book.
Yeah, that was the one I just found too. So dig it. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I've been pasting it in the YouTube chat as an FYI.
Perfect. Good. No,
so that one does not use the compatibility APIs. It's more, if I know Spring, how do I kind of map these concepts over to Quarkus, right? Whereas, or vice versa. And the compatibility is less about that. It's about, it's not really about portability, about porting apps to Quarkus. It's more like, I want to get started with Quarkus. I know Spring. What's the fastest way for me to pick up? Well, hey, use the compatibility API.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and there are some stories on Quarkus.io/blog. There's a link for user stories. And you'll see some people use the APIs. Some people said, well, JAX-RS and Spring Web are close enough where we just decided to switch over to JAX-RS.
Yeah,
right?
They are very close.
Yeah, so take pick your evil, I guess the right word phrase.
So it's kind of funny. Both myself and from our own account, we put in the URL for the book, but I also added our own Eric Koslow from the Java Q at InfoQ actually did a review of that book on fooj.io not too long ago. So you can check
awesome.
that out as well.
Yeah, cool. Good. All right, what else? Aside from demos, like I can show you metric stuff. We can go whatever direction the community wants at this point. Or we can say, oh my God, I'm done and I'm hungry and I want beer. Or except we don't get.
Well, the beer part's coming, yes, but yeah, the metrics is cool, and what I know, there is an effort, I think, at some point to switch from metrics to micrometer in the micro profile world, and I don't know where exactly where that stands or what you guys are using. Do you prefer one over the other?
So this is my fault. How do I want to say this?
Yeah, you picked the right person or wrong person to ask that question to, depending on your perspective.
So this is my fault. This is totally my fault. So a long time ago, when I was at IBM, I talked to my IBM friends. We got to catch up with Spring. You should pick up Drop Wizard, and then I had to go do other things. And in the meanwhile, life happened. Kids happened. Well, I know I had the kids, but things happened, and so where we are now is hang on. I actually have my God knows how much data is running because no, don't save. Skip that. Keep my stuff. So this Monster Combat app. This is what I use to explore application metrics. I did QCon Plus on Monday, so I now have like 3 days of monster data. Okay, so I should show you the other one too. This is all running on my Linux box. That's why this works. So if I pull up my, this is all from the app that I just visited briefly. that monster combat app. Let's just show, which one? So there's all kinds of things that I measure in this app with Dungeons and Dragons monsters fighting each other, like hits and misses and all kinds of stuff. And it ends up creating a lot of metrics, which was the point, was the whole point of the app. Now, from a convention perspective, so I started this app, to give a talk at Spring 1. And so I use Micrometer because Micrometer is what Spring uses now as of Spring Boot 2. They flipped over to Micrometer, which is dimensional data first, rather than anything hierarchical. It's dimensional data first, and it is a little more oriented towards Prometheus, where Prometheus wants deferred calculation. So you don't do pre-computation in Prometheus realm. You just shove cumulative raw data out, and Prometheus scrapes it, and Prometheus lets you do math later, right? So, for example, if I take rolls, no, that's not a good one. Well, we can still do dice rolls. We can do dice rolls because why not? It'll give you a counter anyway. So like if I just look at my dice rolls here, which is going to be 80 million things, I keep having these cumulative counters here. No, this isn't a good one to show you. Which one do I want to show you? Where's my code? What did I call it? Here's what happens. I have this is how I measure my metrics. I've got to go up to the core library and find my combat client thing, and I'm going to go to combat metrics. So this is what happens. Monsters fight each other. We go to this combat metrics class. And my intention when I originally wrote this is that I would have a combat metrics class that used Micrometer and a combat metrics class that used MicroProfile. And in fact, I do have that. That I have a couple of different things that use Micrometer. So this one's in the commonplace. So I can register gauges. I can register counters to see how many dice are rolled. I want to look at the ones that's like how many rounds per attack, right? I've got a couple different things that I'm trying to measure. Distribution summaries are how Micrometer does it, where Micrometer then calculates, this is the key part, the sum, the count, and the max. And the max is hard to see sometimes because it's a sliding 2-minute window. So if you're just messing around on your laptop and you go take a sip of your tea and you come back and your max is 0, it's because you ran out of the sliding window. It didn't see a high value within that window. And that can get real confusing if you don't realize that that's what happened. So the problem that I had, I'm going about this the really long way, I'm super sorry. What did I call that again? Round attacks. So if I start looking at round attacks, this is the problem. And I brought this up with the MP metrics group. So when I first did this, I tried to calculate the same averages, and I couldn't do it because these round attacks here, at the time, MP metrics wasn't even emitting the sum. So it was only emitting the max, the mean, the min, and the standard deviation, and the count. So I couldn't do a fundamental computation using MP metrics, which is to compute an average, because it wasn't giving me the sum that I could use to compute the average. And I was really annoyed. So I ended up having to do, this is why Quarkus has a Micrometer extension, because it's like, we're in the wrong place with MP metrics. It didn't keep up. Everybody shifted to dimensional metrics, and everybody shifted to like delayed, deferred computation of all of these histograms are fine. Histogram buckets are fine, but percentiles and standard deviation and stuff like that, standard deviation only matters for that instance. So when I get to the kind of thing I'm trying to do, where I'm looking at damage per attack type, these are aggregated numbers across a couple different instances. I can't look at a standard deviation in this context. It's invalid math, because that number only matters for any individual instance. And it was like, it's a whole shift when you really start to think about, oh, I'm looking for the aggregate. I'm looking for behavior in the aggregate, trends in the aggregate, to make sure that my system as a whole, or that my 5 or 6 instances that are serving this app, like how are they all doing? You might get down to one instance, But if you are working with a standard deviation, you're kind of, you can't do anything else from that. That's an end, it's an end number. So a lot of the churn over how we get from MP metrics to micrometer and then open telemetry about, beyond that is me pushing real hard, because MP metrics just is not where the industry is. It's off. It has put itself in a corner, in my opinion. That was a very scattershot, short explanation. John, do you need me to clarify anything? I can
No.
I can give you guys recordings of like I could post some links to some of my previous talks about this topic, which would let you see it with a little bit better context.
Well, we're also, at least in the microprofile community, right? And Quarkus implements microprofile. So in the microprofile community right now, we're just starting to talk here about open telemetry and what influence or impact this is going, not impact, but how we're going to, I guess, evolve from microprofile metrics and open tracing. So I thought I'd just throw that one out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's I haven't worked with micrometer yet, and I've done a little bit with metrics. So it was nice to see a juxtaposition of the two, and how micrometer seems to be a little bit ahead of the curve.
John Schneider, I have to give him credit. And if you haven't looked at Open Rewrite, John Schneider's current project is Open Rewrite, which is another open source project, which is pretty cool. The way that he designed the abstractions in micrometer are really, really well done. Is that like that for me? That sold it for me. It's like the way he decoupled that system to have, here's how you do your meters, here's how instruments, like if I, as Quarkus or Hibernate or whoever, if I want to instrument my application, here's the abstractions that I use so that I can have deferred binding, because I might not always be there, or you might not want this binder on, right? Here's the abstraction that you use so that I can set up all the instrumentation I need, and then it can be added at the right time based on the right conditions. And it's just a really good, and here's what the user can do later to turn things off, turn things on, rename things, retag things. It's just a really solid abstraction model that I really appreciate what he did. It's solid engineering. And it'll evolve well. We're actually right now working with OpenTelemetry also, so that as OpenTelemetry metrics, because that will come. People are trying to figure out, either at the collector level, like I think everybody wants the holy grail that we have wanted for 20 years, right? I can remember talking about having correlation IDs that would span across the whole workload. Like we've been talking about that for 20 years. It was just getting there was really hard. There were too many pieces or too many vendors or not enough agreement. And like, we're getting to the place where the way Kubernetes is structured, it's easier for people to plug in at the infrastructure layer, right? And once you start thinking about how service mesh works, like I think some of these ideas have just really started to add to the pot, so to speak. And OpenTelemetry is starting to be like, how can we collect all the things, the metrics and the logs and the tracing, and get some correlation IDs, for splice between in the things. So we'll finally be able to see the end-to-end workload with the context and the metrics and all the stuff. So we're working from within the JavaSig to make sure that micrometer will work seamlessly with that, so that if your application uses micrometer and then you use OpenTelemetry, that will be fine. It will work and you will not have to stress about it. It won't be an either or kind of choice. If I have any say in the matter, it will not cost you anything either, memory wise. That is my hope. It's going to be a little tricky in some cases to figure out how to do that without ending up with duplicated storage. That's the tough part when you're mapping between metric systems, is who's doing the accounting to make sure you don't have it being done more than you need it to be done.
Awesome. Yeah, and also to just as a background, in case anybody is not familiar, open tracing is one of the microprofile specs, but open tracing and open sense is merged, and that's now open telemetry, which Aaron was just explaining.
Yes. Yeah, open telemetry is quite a community too. So if you're interested at all, it's a nice community. It's pretty busy.
Yeah, it's opentelemetry.io, I believe is the website.
Yes, but you can also just search for open telemetry on GitHub. I mean, on GitHub, like they have most of their stuff, like when their meetings are, it's all on GitHub.
Oh, cool.
So you don't have to go hunting for it.
All right, so I have a set of very related questions for you.
Sure.
What does an extension give me versus a typical framework jar? Do I have to write one if I have my own framework inside my organization? And if I want to write one, how would I go about finding out how to do that?
Okay, so you don't have to write an extension. When I first had my disappointing experience with NP metrics, with 0 time left before DevNexus 2020, I just used Micrometer as a library and it worked fine. So you don't have to write an extension. Oh God, am I going to try to do this? No, I am not. I am not going to try to do that. Set. Gimme. Okay. Sorry, I'm flipping. Let me see which. Of course, what I probably have in my subset is right. It's all the CLI stuff that I was working on. All right. Well, we will just see if the world ends. I'm just going to pull up. I'm going to pull up IntelliJ and we will see if it decides it's going to index the universe. Come on, come to mommy over here. All right. While it's loading, I will try to say. So I had a choice with Quarkus or with Micrometer, right? To just tell people to use the library or to write the extension. And I ended up writing the extension. And the reason is, you guys can see, I decided I'm tired, so I'm sitting down. So I decided to write the extension because there are some things that I would be able to do and some things I would be able to make work that would make it really nice for people who are trying to use Micrometer. And so that's why I decided to do the extension, but you absolutely don't have to ever. So with my extension, so remember we talked about build time stuff, runtime stuff. Build time stuff is in these deployment modules. Do I need to make this bigger? Whoops. How do I make? Oh no, what did I do? I expanded the universe. Don't do that. Ugh. Why can't it use Command plus like normal people? No, don't push that button.
IntelliJ is still indexing like our prior comment.
I know I'm just gonna have to be careful to not tell it to do anything nuts. How do I make it bigger?
Is that in the latest version of IntelliJ IDEA? Because I think I have.
Maybe not.
Okay.
I might
I
be
think
behind
if you turn on like low power mode or whatever, like on battery mode, then I think it stops indexing. I can't remember how to do that. It used to be in the lower right hand corner, but
I forget how to make the zoom bigger. I feel like everybody at home and all of you people at home start typing into chat. You woman. There it
is. You can actually use your mouse pad and expand that way.
Wait, what?
Use your mouse pad to make that.
If you pinch and zoom, yeah.
Really? It works?
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, it works for me, but it doesn't work in the project window, but it works in the code window.
Okay.
That's been my
I'll worry about that later.
Right. Yes, I've noticed that too.
Perfect. Perfect. Great. I will see that when it comes. So, no, why am I in mutiny? I meant to be in Micrometer. Come on, Aaron, pay attention. All right. So deployment is build time. So like what I do with Micrometer as an example of an extension that I made from scratch because we had a problem to solve is this is where I'm looking to see if I have anything to do, right? So there's 2 things that I'm specifically doing with the Micrometer extension that you might not need to do, right? And that is, it's trying to like anticipate this dead code path and dead code path elimination stuff. Do I have things that I have to do? So there's stuff like if you have turned metrics off because you set the config, okay, well, we're not doing anything, bail. So like here I'm looking to see, this is like a Boolean class and I'm looking to see in the config if Micrometer has been enabled. And I'm not running any of these build steps unless micrometer is enabled. There's some additional build steps that I only run if both micrometer and the Prometheus registry, which is part of micrometer core, is enabled, right? That's like setting up the metrics endpoint. If you don't have Prometheus enabled, I don't even run those steps. So we don't set up those endpoints and everything's great. I'm doing scanning. I do scanning to try to find any meter filters the user has defined, any meter filters or meter binders that are present in libraries that are around on the class path. If I find them, then I keep them, right? So there's bean, this is where I'm starting to look for recognizable beans. I'm trying to say, if it has this annotation, it's a bean. If it has this, it's a bean. Treat this as a bean, keep this, you know. There's other things that I will do that I can show you too. Here's in the case of reflection, where we want to give native compilation a hint that there's some things that have to be available for reflection. The counted annotation, the timed annotation, and some of the histogram stuff that has to be present for reflection. I get to do that. I can do it here because I'm right. So in the way the question was phrased, like if I'm writing an extension that then my coworkers are going to use, one of the things my extension can do is set up all of these tricky reflection things so that we don't have to have it in everybody's apps. The extension just does it. As part of build time, it just makes sure that all the stuff works properly. And that, you know, whatever you need for reflection or whatever is done correctly, only done once, everybody else benefits, that kind of thing. I'm doing some annotation transformation. One of the things that I do that in two different ways, but I try to transform annotations, make sure that they are correct and complete, because that way at runtime, I don't have to worry about trying to figure anything out. It's the annotation data is always complete and always has all the values that I need, which just saves me time because I don't need to then figure that stuff out at the end, you know, at the interception point every single time, because why would you do that? It's a waste. So there's that kind of thing. And then this is where you start seeing things. I'm sorry, I'm going fast, but we're kind of skirting. But like when you see record annotations, if you go and look at Quarkus code and you're like, I don't understand what it's doing. When you see things like that have a record annotation, this is where we're writing code that runs later. So this is the bytecode recording piece. I get to write it normally, sort of, mostly. There's some limitations for what I can do in these code blocks because I'm not writing code that runs now. I'm writing code that gets replayed later because I'm recording it. So sometimes when I was writing this, this was one of the parts that actually was like, what am I doing? And I had to, you had to really shift your thinking to write the recording part correctly. But that's what that all does. So like with our NP metrics conversation, one of the things that micrometer extension has is it has support for the NP metrics API. And so at build time, I look for some of these annotations, some of the NP metrics annotations, and I do some doctoring, we could say, of them. Like if I see a timed annotation alongside a count, like a timed and counted together, I will suppress the counted time, the counter. I will just suppress that annotation because the timer has a counter in it. So you don't need both. So I will squash the counter. It's that kind of thing. So I get to do some of this transformation or improvement, or in this case, you can see, if you can see it, maybe can I do that? Ooh, wow, that was exciting. Okay, that was bigger. But you can see like I'm taking some of the type mapping, right? So we have a metered annotation. Well, that's a counter, basically. Simply timed and timed, they just become timed. So it's like I'm doing some of the type mapping from what the NP metrics API wants, and I'm mapping that onto the micrometer types, and I'm doing some of that transformation for the annotations at build time. And that just happens. So that's some examples, right, of what you can do with an extension and why that's useful. The other thing, if I were to show you, flip over to a different project.
For me,
Go
it's
ahead.
like the low hanging fruit for why you might want to do it. And Aaron brought these up. I think one is to fix the reflection problem if you want to compile to native, right? So if compiling to native is important for you, fixing the reflection problem with registering for reflection annotations inside the code there is very useful. But to me, a really big one is to configure the framework if it requires configuration using application.properties or any property source that Quarkus supports, right? So that way you have a consistent way of configuring everything with your application, in a Quarkus-oriented way, I guess. So to me, that's pretty big. And you can get pretty advanced. Like some of these extensions will, like if it's a client that talks to a backend service that you have within your organization, you could set up a health check probe automatically. It's like, well, if health check is enabled, if the health check extension exists and I want to talk to a backend service, then I can automatically create a health check probe, right? On behalf of the application, stuff like that, right? You can be pretty creative.
Yeah. So just to extend a little bit, with Micrometer comes, of course, support for all of the different backend types. So we also have, and some of these, like this one, Azure Monitor, a couple of them were contributed by community members because they're pretty straight up. But like this processor, this is, again, it's dead code path elimination kind of thing, right? I'm only going to set up things for Azure Monitor if the class is present, right? We're doing some basic checking. But again, this is let me identify the bean item. Let me make sure that I'm producing the bean. Then I'm going to produce the registry, and then it's all like this just helps link it with the additional things that the recorder wants. We're able to, with the extension, create some of the CDI hookups that we need. So Micrometer, of course, doesn't care about CDI. It doesn't care about Spring either. It's just a library. So what we're doing with the Quarkus extension is CDI-ifying the meter registry stuff so that it all gets wired up properly. And also then linked into Quarkus config, to John's point. So one of the things I have here, for example, with the Azure Monitor config, right? Here's the config route that happens at build time. This is the stuff where if you change these values, you have to rebuild to get it to change. So like the big on off button for Azure Monitor, is it even going to be present when you finish building? Because again, this is like the big toggle for, are you even going to run these build steps, is the way I think about it. And that's an on off, and you have to go rebuild if you change that value. And then I have for all of the meter registries, we have are you going to want me to create the default bean, or do you want to create the default bean? Because like in the case, we do have out in the wild valid cases where people want two registries. They want the default one, and then like the SRE team has another one that has its own configuration that gets injected with a library or something. So we just use a flag to say, do you want me to create the default registry or not? We use that with a flag rather than with the default bean, because sometimes you want to, and the default one is fine. You just need another one. So that's like all caveats with Micrometer specifically. But then we have another config route, which is the runtime phase. And this one is just it's a big property bag, because we take these and pass them directly through to the library. So I'm not recreating Micrometer's config, but because of the way this works, I have integrated it into the Quarkus config model. So I can still read these, I am reproducing to some extent some subset of the config, but additional Micrometer options can get passed in with these property bags, with the way this property bag works. And it goes, like if you look then at the, this provider is going to take the config, this is runtime config, read by, this is the Azure Monitor config, right? So it's being injected with the runtime config. I can look for, this is how I distinguish. There's enabled, which is the thing even going to work? And then there's whether or not you want to publish it. Micrometer says published is enabled. So I do a little mapping back to say, okay, well, if publish is disabled, then we're going to set the property correctly in the map so that then micrometer sees the right thing, right? And we do some validation because this was something I actually worked with the micrometer team on, which is that they gave me a way to drive validation so that I could fail on invalid config sooner, rather than, having to wait. I would have a way to validate whatever config was present so we can fail at the right times. And then we have this conditional registry producer, which takes that config and off it goes into micrometer land. So it's a bit of a meandering explanation, but I hope that's what I can do with an extension. That's what the extension does. That's more useful than just using the library, which we totally could have done. Micrometer could have just remained as a library. But we were able to provide a lot more glue and niceness by making an extension. If that makes sense.
And so there's guides on Quarks.io on how to write your own extensions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, there are several. It's not as trivial as it could be. I think there's lots of, we are actively working on improving our documentation. Especially as I think there's a lot that's actually easier now than when I started. There've been a lot of improvements that make this stuff easier. Are there any other questions?
I was just going to say.
Oh, go ahead, John.
No, just one quick thing. When we first started Quarkus in 2018, we launched with 36 or 38 extensions. Today we've got, I think, 450.
Oh, geez.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those are actually with integration in Camel, right? And all the integration libraries, but there's still just well over 200, 250 of them.
Yeah, one of the links
Just,
that I shared
non-integration libraries
earlier was code.quarkus.io, which is what you can use to create an application from scratch with, pick extensions that you want to enable. And you can see there's just tons and tons and tons between different types of data. There's a search up here too, so you don't have to skim them all like the way I'm doing right now, but you can pick things up with messaging or with config, to use YAML if you want instead of properties files, or like all of these things here. So if you just look at the reactive pieces, this is small, I'm sorry. If you just look at the reactive pieces, to use Mutiny or gRPC, Hibernate reactive, reactive DB2, reactive, like all these reactive JDBC drivers, using reactive routes instead of REST. That's more of a Vertex callback, throwback, whatever you want to say. And then you can opt into all kinds of cloud things, so many things. And here, of course, we have some open telemetries, the first couple things for open telemetry. We have the two things in core that are micrometer, and then the other ones you pick up from Quarkiverse for Datadog and all of the ones that we have defined.
Yeah, I've done a couple of times. I've used the starter application, and it's like, wow, it's a huge list, and a lot of the small implementations are in there as well. And
yes,
but yeah, it's actually, if anybody hasn't used this yet, it's definitely give that a try. There's a lot you can actually add to your application. And
here's some of the stuff that John was talking about. We have a lot of different things that will help you write your OpenID Connect, or your security application, client level security stuff.
It's a great way to start. You don't have to write a POM XML file from scratch either. So that's I think one of the more useful things as well.
Yeah, of course, near and dear to my heart. When you do this, it'll give you the CLI command if you have a project for how to add that extension to a project you already have. CLI commands are all there. Or you can Maven equivalent, or the snippets you need if you're using Maven or Gradle.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on close to 8:30. Didn't know if you wanted to.
Yikes!
I mean, this is awesome.
Thanks for asking questions and going wherever. And John, this has been fabulous. Thank you for coming.
I wrote in the chat.
Thanks for inviting me.
I tweeted earlier, I said, that when you guys started collaborating on changing over, from H2 to Postgres, I mean, it's like, I tweeted all about that. That was pretty cool, we're going to do a raffle.
Oh, you can steal the screen back. I can stop sharing. Thank
Okay,
you,
do have
everybody.
any
Thank you
wrap-up
for having
slides or
me.
anything? Do you have any slides to wrap up or?
I don't remember. I think I killed them.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I closed it and then closed it, gone. But it's basically like a thank you. I think, yeah, thank you for having us.
Oh,
So-
absolutely. This is great, Erin. I mean, especially at the last minute, it was maybe 2 weeks ago, I reached out to you to ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is great, so I certainly appreciate you doing this on a relatively short notice. I do have some closing slides that'll take 2 minutes, and then we can, Barry, I think, is going to run the random number generator. I have one too, but nobody liked it for some reason, but that's okay. I don't feel bad.
Just have to ask him if it's based on, there's quantum computing behind that.
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah, Barry's our quantum computing guy. So let me
I have a quantum computer back here that's generating a
so
All
let
right,
me
I'm going to turn my camera off.
all right, let
you
me
guys
share
don't
my
need me this
screen
way.
and let me make sure I'm on the right tab here, because Scott's gonna give me hell if I go to the wrong tab. That's a long story. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay. All right, so let's go here. Yay, I did it. All right, present. Okay, so we'll take off from here. Quickly, we have some upcoming events. It's going on, well, this is the second week. It's QCon Plus, offered by C4 Media and InfoQ. Jakarta One live stream, which I know, John is familiar, and and Aaron and others. So I was on the program committee for that. So, but there's a great like 12 hours worth of talks and some 15-minute demos in between all of them. So please, if you have some time on December 7th, which is a Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe. And we're gonna let's see. These are the ground rules for the giveaway prizes. It's all legal beagle stuff. The biggest one is please, if you can, you need to be at the end of the presentation to confirm your prize. And where is my other thing here? Upcoming meetings. Here it is. Okay, I must have hit it twice. All right, so next month we have Matt Rabel and Josh Long. They've been collaborating on this presentation called Native Java with Spring Boot and JHipster. You may recall 2 years ago where we still had some in-person meetings. Matt came out to New Jersey and talked about JHipster. So this will be a different twist on all that. We have Billy Corrado confirmed for January 11th of next year, and he's going to give a presentation on JDK 18. There are 6 JEPs right now confirmed for Java 18, which will be released in March of next year. If you read my weekly roundups, you'll get an update every week on what's going on with that. And hot off the press, the rest of the Java user group committee doesn't know this yet, but I just got a response back from Emily Zhang, who is interested in presenting on MicroProfile 5, and they have to confirm the date for February. And I know Mary Gagleski, who is the president of the Chicago Java group, is also interested in presenting. So we'll definitely work on a date for March. So, these last 2 meetings are subject to change. So, the website is will always be updated with the latest information. So there's that. And do we have a winner, Barry?
We do indeed. And the winner goes by the name Rags. Rags, are you here?
If somebody can type in the chat. I'd have to stop sharing for me to check, but.
Rags going once, going twice. Okay, I think. Oh, you know what? We have to, yeah, there we are. Okay,
Are we good? Did Rags confirm?
wait a minute. So we got a response from somebody else. Okay, Maximiliano. There's another person who signed up as rags@acm.org. Rags, are you here?
If you just type in the chat in the YouTube, just to confirm you're here, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I want to give a warning. I have to drop. Thank everybody for coming. I know I said that already, but I have to put my kids to bed. So
Uh-oh,
We don't.
it's that time. So
We're-
I have to
we're
turn into a
between-
pumpkin.
that's
Wait.
absolutely serious. Okay, I think what I'm gonna do, since we haven't heard from Rags.
Yeah,
is-
so-
oh, wait, before I do
All right,
that,
thanks again. Thanks again.
back to Mike. Mike,
I'll drop as well. Thanks.
Okay, John, thanks. Both of you really is, this was really a treat tonight, and we certainly appreciate your time, and to give this great talk tonight. So, all right.
all right, we're gonna
All
do
right,
another
bye.
one here,
Well,
the raffle,
Bye.
and I'm gonna pick it. Oh, here we go. Oh, and it's Chani. Yeah. Oh, Dimitri.
Dimitri was asking a lot of questions earlier, which was
And
good.
Dimitri, are you here?
Yeah.
Dimitri signed on just 3 minutes ago and said grazie. So I think he's our winner.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, congratulations, Dimitri. Thanks for asking those questions earlier today. That was much appreciated. And you'll get an email from me probably at this point tomorrow morning, since it's getting past my bedtime, actually. I'm an early riser. But anyway, thank you very much for coming out tonight. And of course, this is the time for having a beverage of your favorite craft beer or wine or whatever you like to indulge. And that should do it. So we will see you next month. Stay tuned for a website update and emails from me if you're on my distribution list. So have a good night, everybody.